Was my video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the typographic functions of Adobe Illustrator. Now, what you will find is that we have a type tool, okay? And when I click that type tool, you'll notice that over in the far right in the properties panel, a couple of other panels make themselves available. So the ones that we do concern ourselves with are the character as well as the paragraph. Now, just for ease, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up those panels by themselves. So in my window drop-down menu, I've got type and I have character. Now, by default, you can see that the paragraph panel has also opened up. If it hasn't done that, you just need to come window, type, and open up the paragraph one as well. Okay, and you can just put them together just by dragging them into place. Okay, now let's just leave it here for a moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about a few different things with the type tool. Now, you don't need to do this at the moment, but if I hold my button down, you'll notice that we actually have a whole variation of typographic features that we are able to do. The ones that we are going to concern ourselves with for the time being are the type tool and the area type tool, but we will continue with the type on a path tool either later on this class or next class, okay? Because we've got a few things we want to cover. Now, I'm just selecting the type tool, okay? Just the T, not any other function. Now, I'm going to talk my way through how I am going to actually create type. Now, what I'm going to do is, firstly, I am just going to simply click. Okay, simply click. Now, if I zoom in, we get what's called lorem ipsum type, or dummy text, or placeholder text. And there's a whole amount of lorem ipsum that is used as what is called placeholder text when people are designing an article and they don't have the article yet. They can just fill it with text just to see how much room it takes. So I'm just going to come into this lorem ipsum. I've just highlighted it. And I'm just going to just write typography tool, okay? Now, if I keep on typing, it doesn't matter what you're typing, but you can see that just by clicking, I am essentially just adding to this. So I might just highlight and copy all of that, edit, copy, and what I'll do is I'll paste it, okay? And just by clicking, all right? Now I'll make this clear as to what the difference is going to be here. Okay, so I've just clicked and I have created this endless line of text. Now, this time, what I'll do is I'm going to click and drag and create a shape. Now, what's happened there is it's what we call that area type tool. Now, if I adjust the size of that shape, you can see that it flows downward. And this is this lorem ipsum text. So if I just come in and paste what I had copied, okay, you can see that this flows and adjusts. So very, very handy if I was playing with a block of text. Here, I try to narrow this one. I quite simply squash the whole lot together. Okay, so a subtle difference, but also an important difference. I'm just going to undo that. Okay, so what I can do is, well, let's just have a look at some of the functions of the type tool. Okay, so we'll start with this. Now, if I have it selected, here we have the ability to choose the font family. Now, because I do a fair bit of typography on my computer, I have a fair number of different typefaces, okay? Sometimes too many. It's very hard to make a decision, okay? But depending upon jobs I'm doing, I'll quite often, if I'm doing it for a particular job, I'll actually just go in and access a few different typefaces that I can show the client.
Are they all available on Illustrator?
You can get them, and I'll show you right now. Because you have access to the Adobe Creative Suite, if I come in, what I can do, well, actually, I'll do the long way around on this. I'm just going to come to my browser, and what I'll do is I'm going to just type in Adobe Typekit. And you'll see that there's fonts.adobe.com, which if I access, well, obviously I've got to log in with my TAFE email address. And go through with it. And I browse my fonts. Now you'll notice, having done this previously, I actually typed in my name, or you could type in whatever sample text you need to actually do. Okay. And you'll notice here that you have a whole range of different type areas. So, for example, looking at black letter, which we have, let's say if we're doing a heavy metal album or a rap album, we definitely need to have black letter. for the cover. Or if you're doing something very medieval, of course. There's a whole range of typefaces that we actually have. Okay, and so if we just come into, let's just come backwards or browse fonts. Come back to it. And so if I just want to choose serif typefaces or sans serif.
Does it matter for publications whether you use serif or sans serif?
No, you're the designer on that. And so let's just say, for example, you quite like the look of this one. Now, what I can do, New Herman, is I can come in and activate the fonts. Okay. Now, they will appear, maybe not immediately. Okay. But you can add your fonts this way. There is also a website called DaFont, which is also a similarly expansive type library. And here you can see that you can download some for free. Some they ask you to donate to the author because, well, people have created these. Sometimes you actually need to purchase them. Okay, if it says free for personal use, you're right to go. Okay, some are 100% free. All right. So if you're having troubles, and so these are typefaces that type designers have created and made available, and people sell typefaces. Okay, people make and sell them. Okay, so let's just come back here. Let's just see if New Herman turned up. There it is. It did turn up. Okay. So the font is a family of typefaces. Okay. And we'll note that some typefaces actually have variations. Bold, extra bold, light. Not all typefaces do. Some have an incredible number. So, for example, there's this typeface, and it's an old one called Frutiger. Frutiger has several variations with italicized type. It really does depend upon how the type has been created. Okay. So what we have is when we talk about type, and I'm just going to option drag. We have I'll just copy that. What we call serif and sans serif. Oops, I need to actually, oops, come out of that. Now, you will have noticed the difference between these in the past, but I will show you. Here, I'm actually putting a filter on, and I'm going to say, give me only serif typefaces. Okay, so a serif goes way, way, way back, probably pre-Roman, probably going to the Mesopotamian time. A serif is these feet and accents on a typeface. If you have a look at, well, famous old bits of architecture, so let's just say if we come into here, and we go to the Parthenon in Rome. Pantheon in, sorry, wrong one, not Pantheon. Okay, so if we have a look at the Parthenon, here we have this sans serif uppercase type. Okay, that's a couple of thousand years old, that one, isn't it? So serif is actually very, very old, and probably it goes back to when type was quite often engraved in surfaces. These finishes allowed okay. So there's a whole range of typefaces with serif. Sans serif. Sans is Latin for without. And here, with this default, well, with this Frutiger, what we have is a typeface without the fancy feet. Okay, it is without. And we come in, here's my classification. And we can see there's a range of sans serif. Okay, and so sans serif goes back, well, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, sans serif is a typeface. Mid-1800s. You can certainly do some research, but it's much more. So, which typeface looks more modern?
Sans serif.
Yeah.
Why would you say that?
It's it doesn't have any flourish to it.
Mm.
Yeah, so I guess these serifs, we know if we're looking at well, old books or even any books, quite often they'll use a serif typeface. So it has a tradition, doesn't it? It can look a little old-fashioned. It can be used in all sorts of ways. So say, for example, if I've got Vogue, okay, I'm pretty sure it's actually a typeface called Dido. Oh, it's not D. Oh, I haven't got Dido. All right. But there's here we can see with this typeface, it's got actually weights, variation of weight, almost like our width variable tool, hasn't it? Okay, it has a sort of a higher quality to it, I guess, a bit classier maybe. Okay. Sans serif, a bit more bold, minimal. Okay. And so with so let's just go to, okay, so we've got all sorts of sans serifs. What did I go to before? Avenir. Look at this one. All right, a whole range of different weights. Okay, but it does have a bit more of a modern, more minimal feel. If we go a little further, let's copy that. As I said, we've got black letter. Some black letter. Okay, so this is probably something we're more acquainted with old, Middle Ages text when it was handwritten. Okay.
I think your screen's frozen, is it?
Is it? Okay, hang on, I'll just jump out.
Yeah, that's better.
Oh. Okay, so black letter goes back to printing press. So the Gutenberg press in the late 1400s, sort of coinciding with the birth of the Renaissance, the end of the Middle Ages, seen as a big step forward in culture with the invention of the printing press with Gutenberg. But before that, text was hand generated, handwritten, and usually by monks and priests, and it was sort of all this knowledge was sort of very much kept into a very, very small realm of people within the whole population. People didn't have access to that, and so with the idea of mass printing, information sort of did come into the hands of a wider range of people. Then we've got what we call script fonts. Let's just come in here. And okay, so we get our script-based fonts, a little bit more handwritten. Okay, so in all of these examples of type, I think just looking at these variations, and believe me, there are more, information takes on a different feeling, doesn't it, when we see it written in different ways. Okay. So that's one way in which we can choose the value of communication, or the communication itself, beyond the actual transcript, and look at the choice of presentation of type to actually affect the way that it communicates. Another example, I just option drag this. Okay, so if I were to text you in all uppercase letters, what would that be inferring?
Yelling.
I was yelling, excited, emphatic. Okay, so we see uppercase newspaper headlines, announcements. Okay, so again, there's this embedded language just in the choice of presentation of type. Okay. Uppercase, come over here, and then we have italicized type, or oblique. You can see here that it is put on an angle. This is the long way around of changing type, but I'll show you that later. Okay, so choice of type can actually add incredibly to the communication value, okay, beyond the actual transcript in terms of choice in these ways. And so it's something that typographers, and in fact designers, use very actively in choosing particular typefaces for particular forums or outcomes. Okay, so let's just come down here, and what we have is the size of type, and that's measured in points. And so 6 point, I'm sure you've had these choices before. 12 point, 12 point's actually quite large, and if we if we wrote a letter and had it printed out and it was in 12-point text, the type is actually quite large, isn't it? We can come up to all sorts of sizes. And so the size as well can have an effect. Okay? So this is the measurement of type. Now, I'll just come over here and I just have this other text. Now, the reason I have this is to look at the next type variation in what's called the leading. Okay, so I'll just write that there. And so what the leading is the space between the lines. Okay, and you can see that what we call the legibility is actually affected by the spacing. Okay, it can be pretty hard and dense. Type is really, really tight. And so when we talk about type, we do actually affect and make active choices in terms of that will affect the legibility, the readability in this way. Okay. So point size and the leading. Okay, I might just come over here. I'm just going to option drag this one and just going to triple click it. I'm going to write the next one, which is called the tracking. Now the tracking, let's just make this into medium. Tracking is this one here. And the tracking affects the spacing between the letters. I'm just going to hold my shift key and just click up. Okay. We can really affect the communication value of the type by playing with things like tracking. I guess if we make this really, really wide, it actually becomes a little harder to read. So let's just make that 860 or 1200. Okay, so this sort of starts to get our eyes have to do a little bit more work. Our brain has to do a little bit more work to actually read in this way. Okay, so the tracking is something, and typographers in terms of designing will quite often adjust the tracking in a custom way. Okay, there will become a point when the letters blend together too much. And so here you can see I've got minus 100 in the tracking, and it is some of these letters are starting to touch. Now, some of them not quite even, is it? Like some of the, even though it's overall, it's interesting that the spacing does actually vary in this way. So that brings us to the next one that's worth talking about, and this is this one here, which is called the kerning. Oops. So I'm just going
C or K?
Kerin. Okay. Now this is quite helpful, really, isn't it? Because it shows the value of kerning, because here the R and the M have actually joined together, and it could almost be construed as chemming, couldn't it?
Mm.
So let's fix that. So to adjust the kerning, so this is the kerning here, right below the point size. I click between the two letters, and then I can adjust the space between those two letters. And quite often what we need to do is do these manual adjustments with type. Okay, and it really does vary in terms of the space. Looking at type, and when we talk about the importance of type, it's important that it communicates, that it's legible, and that it can be read easily. Okay, those are the overriding factors of type. Okay, you can see here just this. If I'm looking at this kerning, other things start to come into being. Okay, yes, we have equidistant spacing, but some letters actually have negative space, greater negative space between them. So here with these uprights, it's all quite universal, but here in this space between the K and the E, it's actually, even though it's equidistant, it actually visually is a much bigger space because of the kerning. So let's come into the space between the K and the E, and let's adjust the kerning. And so what I'm doing is I'm reducing that negative space. And here you can see it actually works visually a little better. Okay. And I could come in and adjust them all manually. And if you are doing logo design, you will come in and adjust. So what I'd like you to do, so we're just going to keep with these at the moment, okay? So what we've spoken about. And what I'd like you to experiment with in the time that we have left is I'd like you to just choose your name, okay? Whoop, spell my name right. And I'd like you to look at it in a couple of different ways. So firstly, in one line, and I'm just going to option drag. And secondly, I've just hit the delete key in 2 lines. Okay, so in this, what I'd like you to experiment with is looking at variations of type adjustments in different ways. Now, what we're coming to here is what you're going to do is you're going to choose a typeface, and that is going to be utilized as part of your logo. Now, at the moment, we're just experimenting, okay? But I'd like you to try serifs and sans serifs. Perhaps, I don't know if I'd be going with script for me, but okay. And just look at the difference in the communication value that occurs with choice of typeface alone. Okay. And so, oh, actually, we'll just do one more thing. Sorry, I was jumping ahead a little bit. So this is the character panel. Now I'm coming over to the paragraph panel. And what the paragraph panel does is it gives us a number of things, and we'll talk about these in more detail next week. But what we have is, at the moment, this type is aligned to the left-hand side. Here, we have it aligned center. and here we have it aligned right. So say, for example, if I was putting this type against a right edge, then okay, it sort of works a little better, okay? Or a left edge or a center alignment, okay?
How did you drag that second level down to separate the Craig from the Elliot?
The leading. I adjusted the
okay.
leading.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'd like you to do is to do a range of experiments, serif and sans serif, play with the tracking, the kerning, and play with the adjustment. Now, looking at this, okay, now this is the thing with typographers, and they do get very, very fussy indeed. They'll never take a default. They'll say that space between the O and the T is just horrendous. I better adjust that. Okay. All of a sudden, much better. This space between the I and the G, better bring that in a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, so too much. It just becomes the R and the A. Okay, it's just these things that it makes a world of difference when you see them together. Okay. So what I would like you to do some experiments with is playing with some text, playing with your name, and looking at the variations of the different types of text that you can use, and just have a look at the difference that the visual communication can be. Okay. All right. So we'll stop it there. I'll stop recording and